Okay, here we are back again with more Dragon Age Origins, and we're in camp still, and I think we're probably gonna do that again. Probably gonna go through some more Codex, I think, because we have a lot of Codex to go through. And I really like the Dragon Age Codex, especially when we're talking about sort of the culture and the history stuff, and even a lot of the magic and religious stuff, because they're mostly sort of excerpts from in-universe texts. And of course, you know, we have the old adage that history is written by the winners, which that may be a little trite and a little bit oversimplified, but it is absolutely true that history is always written by people with biases, and that absolutely holds true in the in-universe texts about history and culture and religion in Dragon Age and the Dragon Age universe. They're all written from, you know, certain perspectives that are naturally going to be biased. No one is unbiased. No one is completely objective. And so especially when we're talking about sort of things that have happened in universe in the past, we can only sort of... You're always going to be reading about someone's interpretation of past events and things that have happened, or what they think might have happened. A lot of this stuff isn't even necessarily history per se. A lot of it is just legend. It's just sort of what's been passed down from generation to generation that may not be a true reflection of what actually happened. So that's one of the reasons why I find these codex entries so interesting, because sometimes you kind of have to... You always have to take everything you read in this codex with a big grain of salt, because it may not necessarily reflect the actual sort of reality of this world. It sometimes is going to be kind of skewed towards a particular bias, or in order to sort of vilify a particular figure, or raise up another particular figure to the level of a hero when they may not actually be such, and that's going to become more and more obvious as we get further into the series. So I think it's a really good idea to sort of get a good basis for the lore of the world of Dragon Age while playing Origins, because as we get further into the series, a lot of the basic tenets of the lore are going to end up being questioned pretty strongly. So having some kind of basic idea is before we as we go forward is going to be really good to have. So we're going to continue with some stuff about magic and religion. Here's one on the Chantry hierarchy. The Divine is the titular head of the Chantry, although since the schism split the Imperial Chantry into its own faction, there are now in fact 2 Divines at any one time. One Divine, informally called the White Divine, is a woman housed in the Grand Cathedral in Val Royeaux. The other, known as the Black Divine, is a man housed in the Argent Spire in Minrathous. Neither divine recognizes the existence of the other, and the informal names are considered sacrilegious. No matter the gender, a divine is addressed as Most Holy or Your Perfection. Beneath the rank of divine is the Grand Cleric. Each Grand Cleric presides over numerous chantries and represents the highest religious authority for their region. They travel to Val Royeaux when the College of Clerics convenes, but otherwise remain where they are assigned. All Grand Clerics are addressed as Your Grace. Beneath the Grand Cleric is the Mother, or in the Imperial Chantry, the Father. If a mother is in charge of a particular chantry, revered is appended to her title. These are the priests responsible for administering to the spiritual well-being of their flock. A mother or revered mother is addressed as Your Reverence. Brothers and sisters form the rank and file of the chantry and consist of 3 main groups: affirmed, initiates, and clerics. Affirmed are the lay brethren of the chantry, those regular folk who have turned to the chantry for succor. Often they are people who have led a difficult or irreligious life and have chosen to go into seclusion, or even orphans and similar unfortunates who were raised into the chantry life. The affirmed take care of the chantry and are in turn afforded a life of quiet contemplation, no questions asked. Only those folk who take vows become initiates. These are men and women in training, whether in academic knowledge or the martial skills of a warrior. All initiates receive an academic education, although only those who seek to become Templars learn how to fight in addition. Clerics are the true academics of the chantry, those men and women who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of knowledge. They are often found in chantry archives, sages presiding over libraries of books and arcane knowledge. The most senior of these clerics, placed in charge of such archives, are given the title Elder, although such a rank is still beneath that of a mother. All other brothers and sisters are addressed simply by noting their title before their name, such as Brother Genitivi. From a Guide for Ambassadors from Rivain. So that's a nice little overview of the hierarchy. As is probably obvious if you know much about European history, the chantry is based pretty heavily on the medieval Catholic Church, except that of course it's sort of gender bent. So priests are only allowed only women can be priests as opposed to only men. But otherwise it's pretty similar. Demonic possession. Why do demons seek to possess the living? History claims they are malevolent spirits, the first children of the Maker, angry at their creator for turning from them and jealous of those creations he considered superior. They stare across the veil at the living and do not understand what they see, yet they know they crave it. They desire life. They pull the living across the veil when they sleep and prey on their psyche with nightmares. Whenever they can, they cross the veil into our world to possess it outright. We know that any demon will seek to possess a mage, and upon doing so will create an abomination. Most of the world does not know, however, that the strength of an abomination depends entirely on the power of the demon that possesses the mage. This is true, in fact, of all possessed creatures. One demon is not the same as any other. Demons can, for instance, be classified. Enchanter Brahm's categorization of demons into that portion of the psyche they primarily prey upon has held since the Tower Age. According to Brahm, the weakest and most common of demons are those of rage. They are the least intelligent and most prone to violent outbursts against anything living. They expend their energies quickly, the most powerful of them exhibiting great strength and occasionally the ability to generate fire. Next are the demons of hunger. In a living host, they become cannibals and vampires. Yikes. And within the dead, they feed upon the living. So, zombies. Theirs are the powers of draining, both of life force and of mana. Next are the demons of sloth, the first on Brahm's scale that are capable of true intelligence. In its true form, this demon is known as a shade, a thing which is nearly indistinct and invisible, for such is sloth's nature. It hides and stalks unaware, and when confronted, it sows fatigue and apathy. Demons of desire are amongst the most powerful, and are the ones most likely to seek out the living and actively trick them into a deal. These demons will exploit anything that can be coveted, wealth, power, lust, and they will always end up getting far more than they give. A desire demon's province is that of illusions and mind control. Strongest of all demons are those of pride. These are the most feared creatures to loose upon the world. Masters of magic and in possession of vast intellect, they are the true schemers. It is they who seek most strongly to possess mages, and will bring other demons across the veil in numbers to achieve their own ends, although what that might be has never been discovered. A greater pride demon brought across the veil would threaten the entire world. Yikes. From The Maker's First Children by Bader, Senior Enchanter of Ostwick, 812 Blessed. So that's some interesting categorization of demons. These are really the basic ones. These are the only ones pretty much that we'll see in Dragon Age Origins. We will probably see some other varieties of demons later in the series, as once again, the series kind of complicates this very basic understanding of what demons are and why they possess the living. But, you know, sure. That's the Dryadens. That has to do with the DLC that we're going to be doing eventually at some point. Here's one on the Anderfells. The Anderfells is the place where the Grey Warden headquarters is located. It's far to the northwest of Thedas. The Anderfells are a land of shocking extremes. It is the most desolate place in all the world, for 2 blights have left great expanses of the steppes so completely devoid of life that corpses cannot even decay there. No insect or grub will ever reach them. It is a land filled with wonders, like the Murdain, with its gigantic white statue of Our Lady carved into its face, her hands outstretched and bearing an eternal flame, or Weishaupt Fortress, with its walls of living rock towering over the desolate plains below. The Anders, too, are a people of extremes, the most devout priests and the most deadly soldiers, the poorest nation in the world and the most feared. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. So yeah, the Anderfells is an interesting place. Never actually seen it in the games, though one of the books has shown us some of Weishaupt. It's called Last Flight, and it's pretty interesting, but we haven't actually seen it per se in the games yet, but it's quite an interesting place. The Grey Wardens are generally considered to be the real authority in the Anderfells. Nominally, the Anderfells does have, like, a king, but the Grey Wardens are basically the political power there. The king is mostly just a puppet for the first warden. Here's a Codex entry on the Thedas calendar. For most good folk, the details of our calendar have little purpose. It is useful only for telling them when the Summer Day Festival will be held, when the snows are expected to begin, and when the harvest must be complete. The naming of the years are a matter for historians and tacksmen, and few, if pressed, could even tell you the reason that our current age is named after dragons. It is 930 Dragon Age, the 30th year of the 9th age since the crowning of the Chantry's first divine. Each age is exactly 100 years, with the next age's name chosen in the 99th year. The scholars in Val Royeaux advise the Chantry of portents seen in that 99th year, and Chantry authorities pore over the research for months before the divine announces the name of the imminent age. The name is said to be an omen of what is to come, of what the people of Thedas will face for the next 100 years. The current age was not meant to be the Dragon Age. Throughout the last months of the Blessed Age, the Chantry was preparing to declare the Sun Age, named for the symbol of the Orlesian Empire, which at that time sprawled over much of the south of Thedas, and controlled both Ferelden and what is now Navarra. It was to be a celebration of Orlesian imperial glory. But as the rebellion in Ferelden reached a head and the Battle of River Dane was about to begin, a peculiar event occurred, a rampage, the rising of a dreaded high dragon. Dragons had been thought practically extinct since the days of the Navarran dragon hunts, and they say that to see this great beast rise from the Frostbacks was both majestic and terrifying. As the rampage began and the high dragon decimated the countryside in its search for food, the elderly divine Faustine II abruptly declared the Dragon Age. Some say the divine was declaring support for Orlais in the battle against Ferelden, since the dragon is an element of the Dufail family heraldry of King Megran, the so-called usurper king of Ferelden. Be that as it may, the High Dragon's rampage turned towards the Orlesian side of the Frostback Mountains, killing hundreds and sending thousands more fleeing to the northern coast. The Ferelden rebels won the Battle of River Dane, ultimately securing their independence. Many thus think that the Dragon Age will come to represent a time of violent and dramatic change for all of Thedas. It remains to be seen. From The Studious Theologian by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar, 925 Dragon. So, some interesting thoughts on, what the future might hold for Thedas. Here's a good one on Denerim. When anyone in Ferelden speaks of going to the city, they inevitably mean Denerim. There is no other place in the kingdom which rivals it, not in size, population, wealth, or importance. It is the seat of the Theron family, the capital of Ferelden, the largest seaport, and, by ancient tradition, the meeting place of the Landsmeet. As well, Denerim was the birthplace of Andraste. One of them, anyway, as several other sites claim to have been the prophet's early home, including Jader in Orlais. The Chantry takes no stance on which site's claim is valid, but it is well known that Andraste was Ferelden by birth. When visiting the pilgrimage site in Denerim, it is inadvisable to mention Jader at all. The city rests at the foot of the Dragon's Peak, a solitary mountain scarred by ancient lava flows. During Andraste's lifetime, it reputedly filled the sky with a great column of black ash and sent burning rock raining down as far away as the Free Marches, but it is now considered extinct. Some believe it merely sleeps and will again darken the sky with ash and fire when the last Ferelden king dies, but this is highly unlikely. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. I don't know, man. The Pompeians, they built their city in the shadow of what they thought was a dormant volcano, and look how that turned out for them. Here's some notes on dragon cults. Let us suggest for the moment that a high dragon is simply an animal. A cunning animal, to be sure, but in possession of no true self-awareness or sentience. There has not, after all, been a single recorded case of a dragon attempting to communicate or performing any act that could not likewise be attributed to a clever beast. How, then, does one explain the existence of so-called dragon cults throughout history? One dragon cult might be explainable, especially in light of the reverence of the old gods in the ancient Tevinter Imperium. In the wake of the First Blight, many desperate imperial citizens turned to the worship of real dragons to replace the old gods who had failed them. A dragon, after all, was a god figure that they could see. It was there, as real as the archdemon itself, and, as evidence makes clear, did offer a degree of protection to its cultists. Other dragon cults could be explained in light of the first. Some cult members might have survived and spread the word. The worship of the old gods was as widespread as the Imperium itself. Certainly such secrets could have made their way into many hands. But there have been reports of dragon cults even in places where the Imperium never touched, among folks who had never heard of the old gods or had any reason to. How does one explain them? Members of a dragon cult live in the same lair as a high dragon, nurturing and protecting its defenseless young. In exchange, the high dragon seems to permit those cultists to kill a small number of those young in order to feast on draconic blood. That blood is said to have a number of strange long-term effects, including bestowing greater strength and endurance, as well as an increased desire to kill. It may breed insanity as well. Navaran dragon hunters have said these cultists are incredibly powerful opponents. The changes in the cultists are a form of blood magic, surely, but how did the symbiotic relationship between the cult and the high dragon form in the first place? How did the cultists know to drink the dragon's blood? How did the high dragon convince them to care for its young, or know that they would? Is there more to draconic intelligence than we have heretofore guessed at? No member of a dragon cult has ever been taken alive, and what accounts exist from the days of the Navaran hunters record only mad rants and impossible tales of godhood. With dragons only recently reappearing and still incredibly rare, we may never know the truth, but the question remains. From Flame and Scale by Brother Florian, Chantry Scholar, 928 Dragon. Don't suppose we will get any, meet any dragon cults in this game. Can't imagine. History of Ferelden Chapter 1. Ferelden, as we think of it now, did not exist before the Exalted Age. Instead, the valley was divided up into dozens of old Alamari clans. They warred constantly with one another over land, honor, the allegiance of the freeholders, and, on one notable occasion, the name given to a favorite Mabari. And then, in the 33rd year of the Exalted Age, Calenhat Thirin became Tairn of Denerim, and everything changed. Most of what we know about the founding of our nation comes from old songs that the bards passed down through the ages. The songs are filled with wild exaggerations and outright lies, but this hardly differs from the scholarly papers of some of my contemporaries. There is no agreement among poets or scholars on how he did it, but Calenhad gained the support of the Circle of Magi, and they crafted for him a suit of silvery white armor that, by all accounts, repelled both arrow and blade. Calenhad led his army across the valley and captured Redcliffe, one of only 3 men who ever successfully laid siege to that fortress, and presented himself to the bands of the Landsmeet as their king. The poets tell us that every lord knelt before Calenhad without question. The fact that he attended the Landsmeet surrounded by ash warriors and loyal mages of the Circle is generally omitted from the ballads, however. From Calenhad came the line of Thirin kings and queens who reigned uninterrupted until the 44th year of the Blessed Age, when the Orlesian invasion came. The rightful king was forced to flee Denerim, and for 70 years a puppet sat upon the throne. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. So, that's some nice ancient history for Ferelden. So Calenhad would be Alistair's, direct ancestor, at least theoretically. That's some pretty big shoes to fill. Sorry about that, Alistair. Culture of Ferelden. The Fereldans are a puzzle. As a people, they are one bad day away from reverting to barbarism. They repelled invasions from Tevinter during the height of the Imperium with nothing but dogs and their own obstinate disposition. They are the coarse, willful, dirty, disorganized people who somehow gave rise to our prophet, ushered in an era of enlightenment, and toppled the greatest empire in history. There are few things you can assume safely in dealing with these people. First, they value loyalty above all things, beyond wealth, beyond power, beyond reason. Second, although they have nothing in their entire country which you are likely to think at all remarkable, they are extremely proud of their accomplishments. Third, if you insult their dogs, they are likely to declare war. And finally, the surest sign that you have underestimated the Fereldans is that you think you have come to understand them. Empress Celine I of Orlais, in a letter to her newly appointed ambassador to Denerim. Very astute, Celine, very astute. The geography of Ferelden, because why not? The Kingdom of Ferelden is the southernmost civilized nation in Thedas, although some scholars dispute that claim to civilization. Those scholars are probably Orlesian. It is perhaps the most physically isolated of all the kingdoms of Thedas. To the east is the Amaranthine Ocean, to the north is the Waking Sea, and to the south the Korkari Wilds, which in the summer months are a vast peat bog, and in the winter become a treacherous labyrinth of iced-over waterways. The Frostback Mountains guard the western border, and only a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea allows travel between Ferelden and Orlais. Most of the land in the central portion of the kingdom, called the Banorn, is open plains. These are crossed by the remnants of an ancient Tevinter highway that once connected Val Royeaux with Ostagar on the edge of the Korkari Wilds. The western part of Ferelden is dominated by Lake Calenhad, a huge caldera filled by the runoff of glaciers from nearby mountains. Lake Calenhad is home to the famed fortress of Redcliffe, as well as the Circle Tower, which houses Ferelden's Circle of Magi. In the east is the vast Brasilian forest, which the superstitious locals profess to be haunted, and from which rises the Dragon's Peak, a solitary mountain that guards the capital city of Denerim. And that's also from In Pursuit of Knowledge. Brother Jenna TV is incredibly prolific, and one of the foremost informants in the Dragon Age Codex, I have to admit. Politics of Ferelden. Let's go over this. This is probably pretty important, actually, and very relevant to our current situation, considering that we're in Ferelden and we're dealing with Ferelden politics. To our neighbors, Ferelden seems utterly chaotic. Unlike other monarchies, power does not descend from our throne, rather it rises from the support of the freeholders. Each freehold chooses the ban or Arl to whom it pays allegiance. Typically, this choice is based on proximity of the freehold to the lord's castle, as it's worthless to pay for the upkeep of soldiers who will arrive at your land too late to defend it. For the most part, each generation of freeholders casts its lot with the same ban as their fathers did, but things can and do change. No formal oaths are sworn, and it is not unheard of, especially in the prickly central Banorn, for bans to court freeholders away from their neighbors, a practice which inevitably begets feuds that last for ages. Tairns arose from amongst the bands, war leaders who, in antiquity, had grown powerful enough to move other bands to swear fealty to them. There were many Tairns in the days before King Calanhad, but he succeeded in whittling them down to only 2, Gwarin in the south, Hyever in the north. These Tairns still hold the oaths of bands and Arls who they may call upon in the event of war or disaster, and similarly the Tairns still hold responsibility for defending those sworn to them. So the Tairns are kind of like dukes, I would guess. The Arls were established by the Tairns, given command of strategic fortresses that could not be overseen by the Tairns themselves. Unlike the Tairns, the Arls have no bands sworn to them, and are simply somewhat more prestigious bands. The king is, in essence, the most powerful of the Tairns. Although Denerim was originally the Tairnir of the king, it has since been reduced to an Arling, as the king's domain is now all of Ferelden. But even the king's power must come from the bands. Nowhere is this more evident than during the Landsmeet, an annual council for which all the nobles of Ferelden gather, held for almost 3,000 years except odd interruptions during blights and invasions. The sight of a king asking for and working to win the support of lesser men is a source of constant wonder to foreign ambassadors. So yeah, that's sort of how Ferelden works. In essence, it's a lot more like medieval England or early modern England than anything else. It's mostly what it's modeled after. The idea of the Landsmeet is sort of like, the idea of a parliament, or the idea that the king has to have the loyalty of his nobles, has to have the support of his nobles in order to rule effectively. It's a very English thing. It's very much a part of English history, and so that's kind of where they got the idea, I guess, to do this. Ferelden is very English in that way, in that sense. It's not a sort of top-down ruled way that Orlais is, where basically the nobles all sort of jostle for it, and then whoever ends up on top becomes the emperor or empress, and pretty much has absolute authority over the country once you sort of scramble to that position. So yeah, we're about out of time now, so we'll leave it here. As always, if you like what you see, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode. Later!